Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is an action movie review and I'll be having a look at the movie GATEN Ragnarok, also known as simply Ragnarok. So this is actually a Norwegian film, I believe, and the best way I can describe it is a kind of cross between an Indiana Jones type film and a kind of creature feature. Now first thing, this is not an English language film, so if you're adverse to reading subtitles, you may want to skip this film. However, if you don't mind reading a few subtitles, let me tell you a little bit about the plot. So basically what you've got here is the main character, and I forget the character's name, I do apologise, and he's basically this archaeologist who has been widowed, I think 5 or so years ago, and he's got these 2 young kids, and he's kind of trying to prove that the existence of Vikings in a particular area of Europe, and he's kind of poo-pooed by all his contemporaries, but one day a kind of colleague of his finds some evidence to support his theory. So he gathers up his kids, takes his colleague Alan, and then meets up with a female archaeologist and a guide in this kind of remote part of Europe, and basically trundles off to try and find evidence of Vikings in this particular area. And they end up in this place that they call Odin's Eye, which is essentially a kind of large lake with a kind of a smallish island in the middle. And then of course they do discover evidence of Vikings and things like that. However, what they don't anticipate is a large kind of lake monster also inhabiting the waters, which looks like it's killed all pretty much anyone who's been there before, including the Vikings and some kind of soldiers beforehand as well. And then pretty much the movie just turns into a kind of chase film, ultimately, that's kind of they're pursued by and trapped by this large beast. Now, it sounds pretty decent, and it's certainly not a bad film. It does have a couple of issues, I would say, with it. Two main ones. Firstly, it drags a little bit. So I guess really the first 2/3 of this film, there's certain areas of it where it just kind of drags and kind of just goes a little bit longer than I feel it had to, and it kind of gets a little bit boring in some places, which is a bit of a shame. The other thing I would say is it's not a particularly original plot, and there's nothing really surprising that happens. You're introduced to a few characters, and you think, that guy's a bad guy, that guy's going to die, that guy's going to do that. And it pretty much just, it really doesn't sort of defy any of your expectations in regards to what you think is going to happen with certain characters in certain situations. So it becomes a little bit predictable. And you put that with kind of, sometimes it gets a little bit boring. Ultimately, it doesn't make it necessarily a fun movie all the time. Now, despite they say it's kind of like Indiana Jones, it actually rattles on at a slower pace. Now that isn't criticism exactly, it's just an observation. It might not be for everyone in that respect. Now, in regard to the acting, I always find it quite difficult to judge actors if they're not speaking English, because I don't really know how they're going to deliver in their lines. It seems okay to me. I don't think they don't seem to be bad actors from what I can see, but I feel I can't really judge too much on the acting. Special effects, however, I would say were pretty damn good. It's kind of this lake monster is essentially like a large snake monster, and what I kind of like, they kind of sort of basically say it's kind of if you remember the sort of Viking ships, for example, a lot of them will have like serpents' heads and things like that on there, and they're basically saying the Viking sort of based that kind of design off this monster. So that was kind of quite cool, and the effects, I have to say, are pretty good. The monster's actually quite terrifying, and has some good sort of sound effects when it roars and stuff like that. But also the locations, I think, are really good. The camera work is all pretty good. And the actual production value, I say, looks quite lavish on this movie. Characters as well, I have to say, although they're cliched, they're kind of quite likeable, and they're kind of this little son is sort of quite sort of comedy lines sort of said in it as well. It's also, I mean, it's not a jokey movie, but there's a few sort of funny lines here and there. I guess maybe the main, Sigurd, I think his name is, the main guy, he could possibly be considered a little bit wet, in opinion, but, take it or leave it. But overall, I actually quite enjoyed this movie, despite it being a little bit slow in places and a little bit cliche. It was still a good adventure movie. I'm going to give this movie a 6.5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment. I'll look forward to you next time. Bye for now.